Part 47. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocnu. Chapter 461. No one expected that Mewtwo would actually come out from the depths of the dark forest at such a critical moment. Mewtwo was holding a blood-red demon sword, and there were wisps of blood on the sword. He was walking towards them, but strangely, no one could feel the slightest breath. If it weren't for the rustling sound coming from the dark forest, everyone wouldn't even realize that this figure suddenly appeared behind them. Several people were still unaware of the shocking scene that happened in the jungle battlefield behind them, but just from the strong blood drifting from the front, they realized that something was wrong. Chew Mew. Yafanyan's tone became a little doubtful, and her eyes stared at the blood-red demon sword in the black-robed figure's hand like a torch. She suddenly recalled that in the God Realm world, the black-robed figure in front of her was holding that scarlet blood blade, turning into an unparalleled overlord who stood in front of thousands of armies. Based on the scene in front of him, Yafanyan had already guessed some clues. The momentum here is so huge, do you mind if I come to join in the fun? The man's magnetic voice came from under the mask, and his deep pupils swept across everyone, with an inexplicable smile in his eyes. For some reason, under this glance, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. When Lu Qianqian saw the black-robed figure wearing a mask, her delicate body trembled instantly, tears flashed in her watery eyes, and her beautiful face actually showed an unprecedented grievance. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but finally lowered her head in disappointment, not daring to look at Mewtwo. On the other side, the dark crow, who was besieged by the black flame tiger and Yeshinwei, seemed to suddenly understand something, and the black feathers under his body shot out, repelling Yeshinwei to the side. A flash of understanding flashed across his crimson pupils, and he looked at the giant black tiger with a gloomy tone and a bit of determination. No, that's not right, you are not the eldest brother. The giant tiger in front of him was clearly a remnant soul wrapped in black flames, with a powerful aura but far less strength than the original body. Thinking that he was actually teased by a wisp of living soul, a bit of anger appeared in Dark Crow's calm pupils for the first time. If you are really the Mangshan Qianhu, I am still a little afraid, but a remnant soul dares to be presumptuous in front of me. After speaking, countless groups of dark black smoke swept and condensed in front of Dark Crow, and a burst of crows cried shrilly from it, and a strong wave spread out. Roar! But suddenly, a fierce roar like a wolf or a dog came from a distance, and the air began to be filled with a strong smell of blood. Then, a giant dog with fangs and blood burning all over its body suddenly rushed out from the forest, with blood flowing all over its body like a spring, and turned into steaming blood flames in an instant. The blood origin demon dog, which had been lying on the ground, actually struggled and rushed out at this time. The blood origin demon dog rushed out of the dark forest with a desperate momentum, let out a loud roar with a hideous face, and its body began to burn with blood flames. The next moment, a half-moon mark appeared on its forehead with rising blood flames. Burn my remaining body, respectfully asked the Beast King to eliminate the enemy of my beast clan and keep my beast nest peaceful. The demon dog roared deeply, and his eyes showed a resolute look of death together. The crescent moon above the demon dog's head suddenly bloomed with a dazzling silver-white light. As the light bloomed from the sky, a silver-white shadow emerged from the moonlight. This shadow looked extremely blurry, but a human figure could be vaguely seen, with dazzling silver-white light all over its body, as if covered with a layer of white gauze cast by moonlight. An ancient and powerful aura came over, and the hidden beasts and monsters in the distant forest seemed to be inspired by something, and roared with awe and respect in their voices. Is that the Beast King? Yeshinwei in the distance couldn't help but feel a tremor in his heart after feeling this breath, staring at the white shadow under the moonlight. Xiao Yunyi and others' hearts beat wildly, their souls throbbed, and their pupils were shocked after this ancient aura came over them. This is the target they want to kill this time, the Beast King deep in the nest of all beasts. Just a residual image has such a terrifying power. Yu stood on the hillside, looking at the white shadow emerging under the moonlight, and a gleam of brilliance flashed in the pupils under the mask. Interesting. He felt a familiar breath from this residual shadow. This breath was beyond the level of destruction, and it was vaguely comparable to the heavenly Deo. That was the energy fluctuation that only came from the Deoan realm. Even though the Beast King in the nest of all beasts had not yet broken through to the Deoan realm, it was not far from the Deoan level. Since the Beast King had already appeared, there was no need for the Nether Evil Tiger to appear. With this thought, Yu waved his hand silently. I saw the dark Nether Evil Tiger in the distance open its mouth and roar, and it turned into black flames and dissipated out of thin air. Almost the next moment after the Nether Evil Tiger disappeared, the shadow of the Beast King condensed under the moonlight spread out with one hand. The moonlight turned into a long silver whip, like a silver dragon, lashing at the dark crow in the air. Old 4, are you crazy? A look of horror appeared in Dark Crow's pupils. He didn't expect that the blood demon dog would pay the price of his life to summon the Beast King's phantom to die with it. The wings behind him flapped and tried to escape, but the moonlight seemed to have some kind of restraining effect on the beasts. Under the shining silver-white moonlight, Dark Crow's originally extremely fast figure actually froze for a moment, and even his expression became panic. It was during this moment of sluggishness that the silver-white long whip had already hit Dark Crow's body. The latter immediately let out a wail, and his figure scattered into crows all over the sky. When he condensed again, a bloody scar appeared on his back. The wound that was so deep that the bone could be seen continued to steam out black smoke, but it was difficult to heal. As soon as the Beast King made a move, Dark Crow, who had been fighting with Yeshinwei for a long time without any injuries, instantly fell into a disadvantage. Along with the silvery white moonlight, an ancient aura spread out, suffocating the people below. Everyone couldn't believe that this Beast King, who had obviously transformed into a human form, had such a terrible sense of oppression just by appearing with a residual shadow. The power of the Beast King was so terrifying. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 462. As the silver light flashed, what no one expected was that the white figure was after repelling the Dark Crow. The clear moonlight in the sky actually turned into silver-white streaks all over his body. The silver-white bolts spread and exploded along the sky, wreaking havoc and invading the forest like long whips. The moment the surrounding ground was hit by the silver-white bolts condensed by the moonlight, there was a loud bang, and then a long crack like a canyon actually opened. Not good. When everyone in the distance saw this scene, their eyes trembled and they looked panicked. This Beast King's phantom actually launched an indiscriminate large-scale attack after appearing. It actually wanted to kill everyone present. The silver-white pylon condensed by the moonlight brings boundless power, spreading from the battlefield like a lotus blooming. The battlefield that was originally turned into a wasteland was cut by the beatings of the silver-white horses, and long, narrow and deep cracks suddenly appeared. Even the distant jungle border was flattened into a plain the moment the silver beam passed by. Yeshinwei's figure was twisted, narrowly escaping Yu Guang Pylion's whipping, but then he suddenly realized something and looked back suddenly. I saw that Ye Fanyan and others were being hit by several silver-white horses, and there was no way to avoid them. Your grandma is a bear. Yeshinwei cursed angrily, and there was a moment of hesitation in his eyes, but his legs and feet were still beating like springs, and his body turned into a beam of lightning and galloped towards the rear. Just when several silver-white swords were about to hit everyone's bodies, at the critical moment, Yeshinwei's figure stood in front of everyone. His arms were wrapped around each other and turned into a green iron color, forming a huge round shield, and several sky-high horses bombarded the huge shield. The ground beneath Yeshinwei's feet collapsed instantly, and smoke and dust flew everywhere. After a few breaths, the moonlight blooming in mid-air stopped raging. When the smoke and dust dispersed, Yeshinwei's figure appeared in front of a collapsed land. Behind him, Yefanyan and others were unscathed, but the former was spitting out blood. A long and narrow blood mark appeared on the chest, and the flesh and blood on both sides continued to squirm, but it took a long time to heal. Is this the rumored Beast King deep in the nest of beasts? Yeshinwei slowly wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth, with a rare solemn look in his eyes as he stared at the silver-white figure in front of him. It's just an unconscious shadow, but its strength is so terrifying. At the same time, the injured dark crow in the sky saw that the situation was not good. A beam of light flashed in its eyes, and it was about to disperse into crows all over the sky and leave. But at this moment, a burst of hot blood flames suddenly burst out in mid-air, turning the surrounding air to boiling. I saw a demon dog with its whole body burning with hot flames actually charging towards the dark crow. The dark crow was caught off guard and was instantly attacked by the demon dog. The sharp claws scratched several deep blood marks on his back, and the dark crow suddenly let out a series of shrill cries. "Dark crow, this is the price you pay for betraying the orcs, go to hell with me." The demon dog raised its ferocious head that was burned by blood flames, its bloodshot pupils filled with fierceness and madness. The dark crow flapped its wings desperately in an attempt to escape, but its body was still tightly bound by the demon dog, and the rising blood flames crazily burned the flying crow. At this moment, dozens of blooming moonlight beams all bombarded the dark crow who was tightly restrained by the blood demon dog. Flames and moonlight intertwined, and accompanied by a decisive roar from the demon dog, the two destructive level existences disappeared under a black mist. Yeshinwei and others in the distance naturally noticed the shocking fluctuations caused by the destruction level fall in the sky. But they had no time to take care of this, because the silvery white shadow condensed by the moonlight had already flashed towards their direction. A huge sense of oppression came over them, and no one had ever experienced such a profound and clear feeling of death. Yefanyan, who was standing behind Yeshinwei, frowned slightly. She knew that if this continued, each of their lives would be in danger. He held the jade pendant around his neck, and it actually shone with an unprecedented golden light. On the surface of the dark green jade pendant, a strange pattern of petals emerged. At the critical moment of life and death, Yefanyan actually did something that no one expected. I saw her clenching the dark green jade pendant in her hand and rushing straight in the direction of the silvery shadow against the backdrop of the cyclone. Sanskrit. Suddenly, Yefanyan's whole body also flashed with golden light, and corresponding to it was the silver-white beam of the Beast King's shadow. Two figures suddenly passed by behind. It was the frightened Yeshinwei and Muqiu who was wearing a Prajna mask. Under the crimson mask, Muqiu's eyes were deep. Muqiu suddenly noticed an aura from heaven on the jade pendant just now. He was already convinced that the jade pendant Yefanyan wore on his chest must be inextricably linked to the way of heaven. If he could figure out where this connection lies, maybe he could explore the origin of the so-called way of heaven and in turn control the way of heaven. The moment Yefanyan rushed out with golden light all over his body, the shadow of the Beast King in the distance suddenly became filled with silver light. Silver light and golden light collide, just like the intersection of yin and yang, day and night interweaving. The surrounding space began to tremble rapidly, emitting a strange roar. The next moment, a dazzling white light exploded in the space, and a strong airflow was instantly dispersed. Xiao Yunyi and others looked forward in horror, but were surprised to find that, whether it was the imposing phantom of the Beast King, or Yefanyan, Yeshinwei, or even Muqiu and others, after the white light was released and the space exploded, they all disappeared without a trace, completely without a trace. Even the ground in front of them inexplicably appeared a deep pit leading directly to the ground, and the residual destructive aura was still impacting everyone's mind. What the hell is going on? All those present were elites among the awakened, but everything that happened before their eyes made them dazed and unable to come back to their senses for a long time. The sudden attack of the beast tide led by the blood demon dog, the appearance of the alien cult and the dark raven of the valley, and the peerless Beast King with terrifying power. No one thought that the final outcome of this unprecedented battle would end with the strange disappearance of Yefanyan, Mewtwo and others. Just when everyone was in surprise, no one noticed the end of the horizon. Gah! In a group of black fog that had not yet dissipated, a palm-sized crow soared into the sky and fled towards the distant sky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 463. In a deep and quiet valley, a pair of clear starry eyes suddenly opened. The coldness rose in the blue autumn eyes, and a crescent-like outline appeared in the misty eyes. A long-haired woman slowly stood up from the lawn, wearing a light dress and a gauze coat. The woman's skin was extremely white, and the blood vessels under the skin could even be vaguely seen through the light white gauze. She walked on the lawn with bare feet, and a petal-like pendant around her neck fluttered in the wind. The woman suddenly released a vast and ancient breath, and murmured, "Demon dog, dead." As this invisible and powerful force spread along the mountains and forests, a heavy roar of a beast suddenly came from the distant valley. The originally fierce voice was mixed with sadness and anger, and a trace of unspeakable fear. Roar. Suddenly, a huge roar that shook the earth came from the depths of the valley, directly covering all the roars of beasts. The ferocious monsters hidden in the mountains and forests in the distance fell silent the moment the roar was heard, and the silent jungle became quiet and weird. There was a sudden violent vibration from the grass under the feet of the long-haired woman. A pair of deep red eyes below suddenly opened, full of rage and bloodthirstiness. The rocks in the depths of the valley began to collapse rapidly, rocks fell, and cracks appeared on the ground under the violent vibration. It was not until this time that it could be seen that the woman was standing on a cliff at all, but a huge monster covered with fur, hundreds of meters high, like a meat mountain. Feeling the violent breath from the monster under her feet, the woman suddenly bent down. She stretched out her jade arm and gently stroked the fur on the monster's head. A gentle look appeared in her clear eyes, and she said softly, "Good boy." The gentle voice echoed in the deep valley along with the evening breeze, and the meat mountain under the woman's feet trembled all over. The fur vibrated slightly, and then stopped roaring and became calm. The long-haired woman saw this and retracted her tender arms, standing on the head of the meat mountain monster, looking into the distance. Ah! A high-pitched eagle cry suddenly came from the night sky, and a huge black shadow passed through the sky, bringing a large amount of whistling cold wind. Looking at a place in the far horizon, the woman's face became particularly cold, and the corners of her lips opened slightly, and she said calmly, "Is it coming?" Just as the eagle's fierce voice flashed by her ears, a huge black shadow hovered over the woman. The fierce roars of ferocious beasts came again from the opposite forest. Countless pairs of scarlet pupils opened in the dark forest, illuminating the entire valley in red, accompanied by the roars of groups of wild beasts, which seemed strange and terrifying. Hoo! The rapid mountain wind whistled through the fields, blowing up the inspiring robes. I saw a slender figure standing on the towering hillside, looking at the night view of the forest below. Under the dim night, the deep red mask covering his face looked hideous and terrifying. Just under a big tree not far away, a beautiful woman with a pretty face was lying on her side, and the dark green jade pendant around her neck was still emitting a faint golden light. Standing in the wind, Mewtwo's eyes became a little deep. When the phantom of the Beast King appeared, they used strong means to fight against two destructive-level strongmen, and the situation was in crisis. At the critical moment, Yefanyan stepped forward holding the jade pendant, and the golden light released from the jade pendant collided with the moonlight of the Beast King's phantom instantly. When yin and yang met, the strong collision of the two energies caused the surrounding space to collapse and become chaotic in an instant. The Beast King's phantom exhausted its energy and dissipated at that moment, and Yefanyan and Yeshinwei, who were at the center of the explosion, were instantly swept into the space turbulence and teleported to a certain location. Mu Qiu, who was standing by, became curious when the space turbulence appeared, and planned to see where the jade pendant would take them, so he followed. The whistling cold wind shook the grass and trees in the surrounding dense forest along the mountain mist, and a rustling sound came suddenly. Suddenly, a heavy and rapid panting sound came from behind. "Who are you?" Mu Qiu slowly turned around, and the pupils under the mask were deep and calm. "I saw a disheveled figure walking out of the forest behind me, leaning against a giant tree, with his chest heaving slightly. It was Yeshinwei, who had just fought with Dark Crow. However, Yeshinwei no longer had the unruly temperament before. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, and there were several small bloodstains on his face that had not yet healed. He looked directly at the black-robed figure in front of him. There was no injury on the latter, and even the robe fluttering in the wind was not damaged at all. Seeing this scene, Yeshinwei's pupils shrank slightly. Even he himself was seriously injured when passing through the dangerous space turbulence. But the black-robed figure in front of him did not look damaged at all. This ability is rare even among the S-level awakeners, not to mention the destruction-level strongmen. Yeshinwei glanced at Yefanyan, who was unconscious under a tree, and turned his head. Looking directly into the deep eyes, he said with a sharp gaze, "What is your purpose in approaching my sister?" As early as before, when he was following the coalition team, Yeshinwei noticed that this mysterious masked man had a close relationship with Yefanyan, and this alone was enough to make him pay attention. He was born beautiful, with a charming smile, and was gifted. How could his innocent sister be abducted by a man of unknown origin? But along the way, the masked man in front of him had never shown any strength, and Yeshinwei could not intervene. It was not until now that the former showed extraordinary power that Yeshinwei was shocked. "If you dare to harm my sister, I, Yeshinwei, will never let you go." "Oh!" A smile appeared on the corner of Mu Qiu's mouth under the mask, and blood flashed in his eyes. The corners of his mouth opened and closed, and he chuckled. "So what do you want to do?" Yeshinwei's pupils shrank, his teeth clenched, and his feet suddenly stepped violently, and his figure flashed on the ground again and again. His arms stretched out and turned into two sharp steel knives, flashing an extremely cold light in the air, and rushed straight towards the figure in front. At the moment when he was about to approach the black-robed figure, Yeshinwei's figure suddenly became blurred and transparent, blending into the ground like a puddle of water. In the blink of an eye, the ground behind Mu Qiu instantly bulged and condensed into a figure. Yeshinwei swung the cold blade transformed by his arm and chopped straight towards Mu Qiu's neck. Mu Qiu stood in place, without any movement, but suddenly there was a mist around him. The cold wind mixed with water vapor condensed into a crystal blue and transparent ice wall behind him. However, the steel knife blade flashing with cold light chopped on the seemingly weak ice wall, but it could not advance an inch. Yeshinwei only felt that what was in front of him seemed to be a 10,000-year-old black ice, emitting a creepy cold air. Next, the cold air spread along the steel blade to his body, and streaks of frost had already condensed on his arms. Yeshinwei was shocked and quickly retreated 100 meters away, with broken ice still remaining on his arms. Just as Yeshinwei was still in shock, the black-robed masked man in front of him suddenly raised his arm and clenched his 5 fingers. Ice explosion. With a crack sound, clusters of crystal blue ice suddenly exploded in the flesh and blood of Yeshinwei's limbs, bursting and shattering his body. Countless pieces of blood and flesh exploded in the air, like a killing flower blooming in the air. However, when Yeshinwei completely exploded and turned into a pool of broken meat, Mu Qiu stood there and did not move. The pupils under the mask were deep and dark. After staring for a long time, Mu Qiu suddenly took a step forward. He came to the bloody mess, and said with a teasing tone, "Your disguise is good, and this appearance can really confuse many people. I just don't know, since ice can't kill you, what about fire? He suddenly stretched out his hand, and a ball of hot and fierce black flame suddenly exploded in the palm of his hand. The scorching flames burned and distorted the surrounding space, and even Yeshinwei could not control it. The bloody flesh on the ground began to tremble, and the blood and broken limbs quickly gathered at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally condensed into a tall human figure. Yeshinwei stood up in a mess with blood all over his body, with a sneer on his face. No, 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 I will show up right away, why bother you so much? After saying that, he glanced at the black flame in Muqiu's hand, and a palpitation flashed in his eyes. Just from the trembling feeling in his soul, he knew that this black flame was much more terrifying than the black flame on the blood demon dog. Muqiu really didn't expect that Yeshinwei, who was so unrestrained just now, would change his face in an instant. Warm Ti. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 464. Yefanyan was walking alone on a dark path, with some vaguely rising bonfires visible on both sides. Looking up, the sky was pitch black, and you couldn't even see the stars. There are tall buildings with exotic characteristics on both sides, and you can hear the laughter of some children and the elderly. The further you walk forward, the clearer the outline of the building becomes. Yefanyan could even clearly see the childish smiles on the faces of children wearing sackcloth on the roadside. Looking at the familiar town in front of him, Yefanyan's face was filled with disbelief. How is it possible? I'm not. Several children on the roadside were still playing and playing, holding various accessories and toys in their hands, with bright smiles on their faces. Several old men in civilian clothes were sitting on the roadside, holding crutches and smiling with relief on their faces. Everything seemed extremely real, and the expression on Yefanyan's delicate face became a little dazed. She tried to stretch her slender arms towards the children playing on the roadside, but her arms became a little trembling at the close distance. However, the next moment, before she could get closer, a high-pitched horn sound suddenly sounded in her ears. The sky in the town suddenly turned blood red, and then a large area of darkness spread from the edge of the town toward the interior like a wave. The ground beneath his feet instantly turned pitch black, and the surrounding candlelight also became a bit dimmer. I saw countless pitch black figures surging out from the undercurrent on the ground, launching a bloody massacre towards the humans in the entire city. These monsters have different shapes and abilities, but they are all ferocious in strength and cruel in temperament. The humans living in the town seemed to have become livestock prey for slaughter in their hands, and the entire town fell into a sea of fire in an instant. Countless humans rushed out of the building, looking frightened and walking in panic, but in the end they could not escape the clutches of those black figures. Children playing on the roadside were brutally cut into pieces, and an old man enjoying the shade fell into a pool of blood. Blurred flesh, broken limbs, and the boundless sea of blood became the only colors in this human town. While Yefanyan was wandering, the surrounding scene changed again. She was shocked to appear in a war-torn battlefield, surrounded by countless figures fighting fiercely. Among these figures are awakened humans with supernatural powers, as well as powerful black monsters with eyes full of raw killing. At this moment, a flash of blood in the sky attracted her attention. Yefanyan suddenly raised his head and saw a bloody pupil appearing in the sky. The blood pupil looks down on all living beings like a god, with circles of megatamas circling in the depths of the pupil, just like the overlap of blood moons. The entire pitch-black night sky was illuminated by this one-eyed glow of blood. The next moment, a domineering and majestic voice came from the sky, which was terrifying and shocking. I use my soul to forge the royal power, ascend the fate of the clan in the eternal night, and control the destiny of all souls. Bawang Yetu, all races surrender. I saw a blood-red figure standing in the air, with extremely domineering armor, long dark red hair, an evil and handsome face, and eyes that looked down upon the supreme power of the world. As soon as this figure appeared, countless black figures below him prostrate and knelt down like waves, making strange roars from their mouths, and respectfully greeted their supreme king. Lord of eternal night. Feeling the overbearing and unparalleled kingly power coming from the sky, Yefanyan's complexion became extremely heavy, and her whole person felt as desperate as if she had fallen to the bottom of an abyss. In a daze, an old voice appeared in her mind again. Child, the human race in this world has no future. Live, you must live. Go back to the past with the hopes of the whole clan, back to 1,000 years ago. Eradicate the ancestor of Yonjai before the catastrophe and prevent the rise of Yonjai dynasty. You are our human race's last hope. You are Dash, son of the Savior. The voice in his mind exploded like thunder. Yefanyan opened her eyes suddenly, woke up with a start, her breathing was rapid, and her face had already turned pale in panic. Suddenly, a soft voice sounded in my ears like a spring breeze. You seem to be having a nightmare again. Yefanyan turned around suddenly, only to find a familiar black figure sitting next to him. Chiu Mu. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 465. Chiu Mu. Looking at the familiar figure beside her, Yefanyan was slightly stunned, her expression was a little dazed. A warm breath came from her side, and she saw the familiar black-robed figure sitting on the tree roots beside her, with a rising bonfire in front of him. The firelight and the warm breath gradually faded the cold memories in her mind, but her face was still pale, and there were a few fine beads of sweat on her forehead. Are you awake? As if sensing Yefanyan's gaze, the black figure sitting beside her slowly took off the prajna mask on his face. Under the hideous and terrifying mask was a handsome face like a spring breeze. Seeing this familiar smile, Yefanyan subconsciously felt a lot more at ease for some reason. The feeling of blockage in the chest gradually disappeared, and her face regained a trace of ruddy color that only normal people would have. The dark night, the hazy bonfire, the deep jungle, and the black-robed figure sitting beside her. In the blur, she seemed to have returned to the secret forest that she had been unable to forget for a long time. Everything was similar to the scene in the god's domain at that time, and Yefanyan's expression became a little trance. You seem to have nightmares often, Miss Jianji, it was the same last time in the god's domain. The man in front of her had a smile on his lips and suddenly approached her. Yefanyan's breathing became a little rapid. But when she heard the familiar name at the end, the surprise on her face began to magnify infinitely. Huh! The cherry lips opened slightly, and the pupils flashed with horror. Yefanyan, whose identity was revealed, began to become a little incoherent. No, you recognized the wrong person, I am not. This time, without her best friend by her side, Yefanyan seemed even more helpless. Her hands began to swing in front of her, and she completely lost her calm appearance on the battlefield. Seeing Yefanyan like this, Mu Chiu's eyes were full of amusement. He walked to Yefanyan with a chuckle and stretched out his hand. I'm not blind. I can't recognize such a beautiful woman beside me. The slender fingers brushed across Yefanyan's delicate cheeks, as smooth and delicate as a peeled egg. The latter's face immediately rose with a blush at a speed visible to the naked eye. For some reason, after the blessing of the holy light, the scar on Yefanyan's face, which had already faded, became even more imperceptible. With the blush on her cheeks and the slightly stunned expression, her delicate appearance was even more beautiful like a fairy, stunning the whole country. If Xiao Yunyi and Xiao Yuntian saw this scene, they would beat their chests and stamp their feet, and weep bitterly. The two of them had been pursuing Yefanyan for so long, but Mu Chiu showed such a little girl's attitude when she just stretched out her hand. It was really unfair. Looking at the helpless Yefanyan in front of him, a gleam of brilliance flashed in Mu Chiu's smiling eyes. www. Since it was still unclear what the former had to do with the heavenly Deo, Mu didn't mind playing a role-playing game with the other party. After a few breaths, Yefanyan calmed down her excitement, but her face was still flushed with shyness. She originally wanted to hide her identity in the god's realm forever, and secretly protect Mu to repay the latter's life-saving grace in the god's realm. But she didn't expect that others had already seen through her identity. Wouldn't her cover-up during this period be as funny as a clown? The nightmare in her mind had completely subsided after the excitement. Yefanyan slowly exhaled and smiled bitterly. You know everything. Mu nodded with a smile and said, thank you for your care during this period. Yefanyan opened her mouth and wanted to say something else, but was suddenly stopped by Mu. Mu put a finger in front of his lips and made a gesture of silence, with a calm smile on his face. As soon as Yefanyan stopped talking, she suddenly found that the surrounding forest had become extremely quiet. It was so quiet that you could hear her irregular heartbeat and a pin drop. Rustle. Almost the next second after the two stopped talking, a rustling sound suddenly came from the jungle on all sides. Immediately afterwards, the figures of wild beasts stepped out of the jungle, and pairs of scarlet bloodthirsty eyes were surrounding the two of them. Yefanyan was shocked to find that the two of them had been targeted by these jungle beasts without knowing when. She frowned, thinking that it was not good, and struggled to stand up. But she was surprised to find that her legs and feet were weak. After barely standing up, the strength of her whole body seemed to be drained. Her body was like a dried-up spring, and she could not mobilize any energy at all. What on earth is this? Yefanyan suddenly remembered something and hurriedly looked down, only to see that the jade pendant on her chest had completely dimmed. Forcibly urging the energy in the jade pendant had already caused her body to be strongly loaded. Now, let alone fighting, even moving had already consumed all her strength. Roar. The low roars of groups of beasts came from all directions, but Yefanyan had never felt so powerless. Suddenly, there was a soothing sound of footsteps behind her, and a black-robed figure brushed past her and walked towards the huge herd of beasts in front. Yefanyan's eyes trembled slightly, and the figure in front stopped. A one-man show between two people doesn't need an audience. The strange words sounded ambiguous to Yefanyan, but immediately the figure in front turned his head and showed a handsome smile. Mu raised a crimson ferocious mask and chuckled. I like this mask you gave me very much. After saying that, Mu turned around and slowly covered the mask on his face. A beam of blood flashed in his deep pupils. Chiu Mu. Yefanyan looked at the figure in front of her, stretched out her hand and was about to say something, but the scene that happened next left her speechless. Mu whole body suddenly burst into a ball of scorching black flames, and the ferocious flaming waves instantly made the surrounding air scorching hot. A beam of blood-colored light flashed in front of Mu chest, and finally turned into a blood-colored long knife wrapped with blood-like lines. Wearing a prajna mask, holding a bloody sword in his hand, wearing black robes, and stepping on the black flames of karma. At this moment, Mu seemed to have once again transformed into the arrogant lonely overlord, standing in front of tens of thousands of enemies. Roar. At this moment, the ferocious beasts and monsters from the depths of the jungle also opened their fangs and claws and attacked the two of them. The surging beast tide engulfed the two of them in an instant, and the violent beast roar echoed in the depths of the jungle for an instant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 466. At night, in a deep and silent jungle, an agile figure was quickly moving among the tall trees. After a few short breaths, the figure had already leapt onto the thick branches of a towering tree. Yeshinwei stood on a branch, holding a pile of fruits in one hand, and slowly stretched out his other arm under the scattered moonlight. Opening his palm, with the help of the falling moonlight, the flesh and blood in his palm began to slowly squirm, and a mechanical device the size of a palm emerged. Looking at the cracked screen in his palm, Yeshinwei frowned. Still not working. During the battle with Muqiu, all his flesh and blood were blown to pieces, and even the communication device inside his body was damaged. In this way, it would be difficult for him to get in touch with the base, let alone transmit the information in this huge 10,000 beasts mountain range. Oh, this is really difficult. Yeshinwei sighed sadly, he hated this kind of troublesome thing. Suddenly, a violent roar of wild beasts came from the distant mountain forest. Yeshinwei's expression changed, he raised his head and looked into the distance. That direction is, Grandma is a bear. Quickly putting away the broken communicator, Yeshinwei moved and jumped among the giant trees in the forest. A green fruit fell from his arms to the ground, rolling along the deep forest. There was an anxious look on Yeshinwei's face, and his whole body turned into lightning and moved in the forest. Within a moment, they were back in the mountain col. His arms turned into extended sharp blades, cutting off the jungle plants in front of him, but the scene in front of him made him slightly stunned. Withered yellow branches and leaves fell, the sky filled with fire growing crazily in the mountain forest, and countless shriveled animal carcasses were stacked in the gaps in the mountain forest. The scorching air passed over these burned to black bodies, instantly turning into ash and flying into the air. As the last huge beast fell to the ground was filled with charred corpses. Countless blood turned into blood threads and gathered in one direction along the mid-air. I saw a black-robed figure wearing a ferocious mask standing quietly holding a bloody blade. Blood souls mixed with flames coiled around the blade, which was daunting. Behind this figure was Yefanyan, who was pale and horrified. The moment Yeshinwei rushed out of the jungle, the black-robed figure slowly turned around. In his left hand, there is still a ball of black flame blooming like bright red. Yeshinwei was shocked and dropped the pile of fruits in his arms. Their eyes met, Yeshinwei raised his hand in embarrassment and waved. Hi! At the same time, in the Dongxiao domain thousands of miles away from the southern border. The end of the Redemption War, in addition to the defeat of the human race, also announced the birth of another huge ethnic group in the end of the world. The royal family of Eternal Night. Under the large-scale presence of the Yanjai clan, the entire Dongxiao territory has completely changed its appearance. Modern cities were razed to the ground, and buildings with alien characteristics were erected. These newly born Yanjai tribesmen have gradually acquired the ability to think independently, and have begun to learn from humans to create a culture unique to them. And this is one of the reasons why many human bases are afraid of the Yanjai clan. Possessing a body that is far stronger than the human race, it now shows intelligence and wisdom like a human being. This has caused a crisis for the overlord who was once the top of the biological chain. No one can guarantee that this evil race created by the Lord of Eternal Night will replace human beings in this world thousands of years later. Located in the middle of Dongxiao territory, backed by mountains, in the former Yuhei base. As a special being that established the Yanjai dynasty's status as the world's hegemon, Yuhei was transformed into a more complete and grand one. Yanjai tribesmen with blood-red eyes can be seen everywhere on the streets, and a few humans can be seen from time to time. In contrast, humans are more like a rare species here. In a demon-headed palace in the center of the Jade Sea, a woman in military uniform with a cold face was lowering her head to deal with documents in her hands. Here are decisions related to the direction of the entire Yanjai strategic deployment, as well as statistics on the territories of major bases captured during this period. After a brief processing, Xiao Hanianying frowned slightly and rubbed the center of his eyebrows with a headache. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, there was a slightly hasty knock on the door. A flash of light flashed in Xiao Hanyan's eyes, and he straightened his back immediately, revealing the unique aura of the Iceberg Queen. After receiving a positive answer, the dark door was opened from the outside, and a slender figure in a white suit walked into the palace paved with red carpet. White Death Ji Yufeng. Heavy footsteps echoed in the empty palace. Ji Yufeng walked to the desk where Xiao Hanyan was sitting, with no unnecessary expression on his face. Many human bases have stated that they will join the battle to encircle and suppress the beast's nest. Many destruction-level powerhouses, including Thor, are on their way to southern Xinjiang. Thor. Xiao Hanyan's tone seemed a little solemn. That was a terrifying existence known as the strongest human being. According to the available intelligence, Lu Jinchang from Qingyang base has led the troops deep into the 10,000 Beasts Mountains. The edges of the mountains are filled with fire and the fighting is fierce. Someone has seen a large area of black flame flashing in the east of the mountain range, with a deafening tiger roar. Ji Yufeng's eyes suddenly became as sharp as a knife. Tianlai novel network. It is basically certain that he is in the 10,000 Beasts mountain range. Hearing this, Xiao Hanyan's face suddenly changed, and her swollen chest rose and fell clearly, and her voice trembled a little. Gathering the existing troops, how long will it take to reach Nanjiang at full speed from Yuhe? Ji Yufeng pushed the frame on his face, and a ball of light flashed in the lens. 2 weeks. After getting the answer, Xiao Hanyan raised her eyebrows slightly, suddenly took a deep breath, a cold light flashed in her eyes, and she stood up straight and looked at the distant sky outside the window. She turned around, and the temperament emanating from her body suddenly changed, as if from this moment on, she once again became the high and mighty queen of Yuhe. The cold and beautiful face opened her red lips slightly, and she spoke a domineering word that could shock the entire human race's top leaders. Notify the troops scattered in the surrounding cities to gather at Yuhe immediately. Our goal this time is to launch a full-scale attack on the southern border and welcome the Lord of Eternal Night. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 467. In a quiet jungle, 3 figures were walking leisurely among the dense mountain forests. It was approaching dawn in the distant sky, but the surrounding environment was still pitch black. The strange jungle was so quiet that I could only hear the footsteps of 3 people, but strangely could not see the existence of a ferocious beast. Yefanyan, whose expression softened slightly, was seen walking in front, and Mu Qiu stood side by side with a slight smile on her face. Yeshan, who was covered in heavy blood stains, walked at the end like a follower, with a strange look on his face and a bunch of green tree fruits in his arms. Feeling that the surrounding atmosphere was terrifyingly stagnant, Yefanyan felt a little strange. Turning around, he introduced to Mu Qiu. The situation was critical just now and I haven't had time to introduce it yet. This is Yeshan, one of the guardians of Yongxiao City in the northern sky region. She turned to look at Yeshan, and saw that the latter was covered in blood, but still looked carefree. She hesitated for a moment before adding, "This is also my cousin." After Mu Qiu turned to look at Yeshan, she nodded meaningfully and smiled. "Well, we have said hello before and we had a great conversation." Being stared at by Mu Qiu, Yeshan couldn't help but trembled again, and the black flame that burned everything appeared in his mind. He is also a smart man, and he hurriedly added, "Ah, yes, Brother Qiu and I had a great chat just now. Come and enjoy the fruit." After saying that, he handed over a bunch of green fruits in his arms. Mu Qiu took them with a smile, not forgetting to say thank you. Yefanyan looked at the 2 people behind him who were chatting happily, and felt a little weird for some reason. When did my cousin, who had always been arrogant, become so easy to talk to? Not only was his tone and demeanor much calmer, there was even a hint of groveling in his words and deeds. Although there were some doubts in his heart, Yefanyan knew that this was not the time to delve into these matters. The jade pendant around his neck was completely dim, and even the energy in his body had been drained. Yefanyan was really in an awkward situation at this moment, where the oil was exhausted. She looked up at the quiet dense forest in front of her and frowned. This is the nest of beasts. Yeshin, who was walking behind, became more serious when he heard this. He slowly raised an arm, and as the flesh and blood on his wrists squirmed, a disc-sized magnetic needle emerged. After staring at the magnetic needle for a long time, Yeshin slapped his thigh. "Grandma, you are a bear." We actually penetrated the entire 10,000 Beasts mountain range and walked 100 kilometers further in this direction to reach the nest of 10,000 beasts. This is simply faster than a large army riding a rocket. Not long ago, everyone on the battlefield saw the dazzling golden light emitting from Yefanyan's body, rushing towards the phantom of the Beast King. Immediately, an unimaginable wave of energy exploded. Following a burst of space turbulence, the three of them were inexplicably transported to the jungle deep in the mountains. Yeshin was smart enough not to ask Yefanyan why the three of them came here. After all, in this huge apocalypse, everyone has secrets that they cannot tell. If Yefanyan hadn't stepped forward, they might all have died at the hands of the terrifying Beast King. Yefanyan nodded when he heard this and did not explain anything. He just said softly, "In this case, we can only set off in this direction, hoping to join the large force before the Beast Lair war." There were too many uncertain factors in the battle with the Blood Demon Dog, including the red-robed Dark Crow of the alien cult, the sudden appearance of the Black Flame Giant Tiger, and the terrifying phantom of the Beast King. There are too many mysteries and weirdness in southern Xinjiang, as if a pair of invisible hands is stirring up the situation in all directions, and they are more like becoming pieces on a chessboard, deeply involved. Yefanyan turned around to look at the two of them, only to find that Yeshin was feasting on a fruit, looking ugly when he ate it. Mu Qiu, who always had a gentle smile on her face, had a black kitten with a round head in her arms. She was obediently sticking out her tongue and licking the back of Mu Qiu's hand. The black hair is smooth and shiny, and surprisingly, there is a black and red flame burning at the cat's tail. The moment he saw the black cat, Yefanyan immediately thought of the giant black tiger that suddenly appeared in the jungle battlefield. In her memory, it seemed that Mu Qiu also had a pet cat that could transform into a giant tiger in the divine world. Until this moment, Yefanyan was shocked to realize that she had also seen the bloody demonic knife in Mu Qiu's hand in the world of gods. Mu Qiu smiled slightly as if she noticed Yefanyan's surprised look. The black cat in his arms seemed to feel something in his heart. He jumped up and turned into a wisp of black flames that surrounded him. Suddenly, a faint purple light bloomed from Mu Qiu's chest, and a delicate box the size of a palm emerged. "This is the sacred object of Zilan Base, the demon's box." Meow. The black flame surrounding Mu Qiu once again gathered into that obedient black cat. This little guy can be regarded as a spiritual being. The big tiger from before was transformed into it. Immediately afterwards, Mu Qiu explained to Yefanyan the powerful abilities of the sacred objects in Zilan Base in a few words. Letting this little guy transform into a giant tiger to fight against the Dark Crow is just a bluff. If it really fights against the destructive level strongman, it won't last long. Mu Qiu stretched out his hand to tease the kitten's jaw, and the latter immediately squinted his eyes comfortably. Yefanyan was slightly stunned by Mu Qiu's explanation, and then her delicate face showed understanding. "I heard that the technological weapons of Zilan Base are extraordinary before, but I didn't expect that they have evolved to this level." Yefanyan did not doubt that Mu Qiu had supernatural powers but did not show it, but she did not expect the latter's strength to be so strong. The beast tide just experienced was not something that ordinary S-level awakeners could contend with. But in this case, wouldn't it make her previous worries seem completely unnecessary? Thinking of this, Yefanyan's cheeks couldn't help but rise to a bright red. After all this time, everything was just her own self-conceit. Yeshin watched his sister's reaction from behind and couldn't help but feel anxious. He simply sneered at Mu Qiu's explanation. His silly sister was usually smart and clever, so why did she lose her mind when she met this man? The scorching black flame even made Yeshinwei tremble from the bottom of his soul. How could it be easily created by human power? But he was not stupid enough to tell everything he saw. Although he looked careless and unruly on weekdays, his mind was more delicate than that of ordinary people. Even he was not the opponent of the man in front of him. It can be said that the lives of the brother and sister were in the hands of this man named Qiu Mu. He dared not easily embarrass this old man. So, Yeshinwei could only vent his resentment on the fruit in his hand, opening his silver teeth and biting it frantically, with a crazy look. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 468. Thanks to the previous battles that had attracted most of the ferocious beasts in the forest, the three of them did not encounter any large-scale beast tides along the way. Even if they encountered a few fierce beasts and monsters rushing out from the surrounding mountains and forests, they were instantly killed by Yeshinwei, who volunteered. Although he was still seriously injured, Yeshinwei was still a genuine destructive powerhouse, and these ordinary monsters were not his enemies at all. During Yeshinwei's battle, Mu Qiu also gradually saw through the ways of the former's ability, and couldn't help but feel very interested. Yeshinwei's ability is called quantum reorganization, which is an almost passive ability. When fatally injured, his physical body will decompose into microscopic quantum structures, which can be reassembled and aggregated in an instant. And this ability can also be integrated with the surrounding things according to his own wishes, and he can transform his own physique at will. Although it is not outstanding in the level of destruction in terms of destructive power, if this ability is used well, it can make the awakened elusive and physically invincible. Physical attacks can't kill him at all, and if he wants to escape, he will be much faster than you. As long as Yeshinwei is willing, he can literally tangle his opponent to death. However, this ability is not without its weaknesses. For example, some elemental abilities are extremely restrained by Yeshinwei's quantum reorganization. I don't know how many ferocious mutated beasts have been eliminated, and the sky in the distance has been covered with a layer of light. And the deeper you go into this secluded forest, the more ferocious the monsters hidden in the darkness become. Gradually, Yeshinwei, who was already seriously injured and had yet to recover, couldn't bear it anymore. Finally, after killing the last ferocious beast, Yeshinwei, whose hands turned into sharp blades, lay down in a pool of blood, his chest heaving violently, and he panted. I can't do it anymore, can we take a rest?" He turned to look at the giant tree beside him, and saw Yefanyan sitting on the trunk, staring at the jade pendant in his hand, wondering what he was thinking. Mu Qiu, who was smiling, held the fruit he had picked so hard and put it to her mouth, making a crisp sound. "Listen, what is that sound?" Suddenly, Yefanyan's voice came from above. At this moment, there was a sudden vibration from the ground in the distance. Just the aftermath caused the surrounding leaves to fall and the woods to tremble. This strange fluctuation was fleeting, but it came again within a moment. "The situation ahead is a bit strange, we need to investigate." Hearing this, Yeshinwei's mouth twitched, he looked at Yefanyan, and then looked at Mu Qiu with a pleading look. After the latter shook his head with a smile, Yeshinwei looked ashen on the spot and said sadly, "Are you devils?" He is a destructive level powerhouse who would be a noble being like a guest in any human force, but here he has become a minion who can be driven by anyone. Even so, Yeshinwei still stood up with tired steps. Until then, his whole body was soaked in blood, and he looked like a bloody man. After standing up, his eyes suddenly became sharp. "Grandma, you are a bear. I want to see who dares to intrude on my rest." After saying this, all the flesh and blood on his body instantly fell off to the ground, turning into imperceptible quanta that merged with the surrounding earth and swam away into the distance. Mu Qiu was amazed to see that such a speed, even at the destruction level, was slightly inferior to space powers such as teleportation. It is no exaggeration to say that Yeshinwei is one of the few destructive awakeners who develops abilities in all aspects. After a while, the surrounding mountains and forests still did not stop shaking irregularly, and at this time, Yeshinwei also hurriedly returned from exploring from a distance. Yeshinwei's figure condensed on the ground, but this time the blood stains on his body had disappeared. When he appeared again, his expression looked a little solemn. The situation ahead is indeed a bit strange. Oh, Miu put the mask she was playing with on her head. There are not many things that can make Yeshinwei, a destructive level being, feel weird. Yeshinwei frowned and said, I found a space barrier a few kilometers ahead. Someone actually set up a space barrier in this vast mountain. The source of the vibration is inside that space barrier, but apart from that space barrier, I can't feel any energy fluctuations outside. Yeshinwei told the two of them everything he saw. Yefanyan frowned when he heard this, and then looked at Miu. The latter smiled slightly and said, since we have encountered such a thing, we naturally have to go and find out what's going on, not to mention. He suddenly looked at Yeshinwei, the pupils under the ferocious mask were full of amusement. We also have Shinwei, a destructive powerhouse, protecting us. Yeshinwei took a step back unconsciously and swallowed. Where? Yeshinwei led the two of them towards the direction of the barrier. Strangely, it was extremely quiet along the way, and there was no trace of the surrounding beasts as if they were extinct. After a while, the three of them walked through the jungle and came to the edge of a cliff. Yeshinwei moved his steps towards the bottom of the cliff, but he seemed to be blocked by some force and was unable to move forward. This is a space barrier wrapped in illusion. Except for the ripples in the air in front of him when the collision occurred, there was nothing unusual from the outside. The existence that set up this space barrier is very powerful, and I can't break it for a while. Yeshinwei shrugged in front of the barrier, indicating that he was really helpless. But at this moment, a sound of footsteps came, and Miu, wearing a Prajna mask, slowly walked from behind. As his footsteps approached, a beam of blood light burst out from the dark purple box on his chest, turning into a blood-red longsword flashing with a strange light. Miu raised his arm holding the sword, and a large piece of black and red flame suddenly burned on the sword. The next second, he swung the blood-red demon sword violently, and a slash wrapped in black flame swept across the sky. Accompanied by a loud bang, Yeshinwei's face trembled. The transparent barrier light curtain in front of him instantly appeared with spiderweb-like cracks. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 469. Accompanied by a series of crisp click sounds, spiderweb-like cracks suddenly appeared on the transparent light curtain in front of them. And the expression on Yeshinwei's face fell into a moment of astonishment. The next second, the space barrier in front of the three people clicked and instantly shattered, and the huge barrier covering the front boundary also disappeared. This is. After the barrier was broken, what appeared in front of the three people was actually a dark valley basin. The three people stood on the edge of the basin like a hillside, below was a dense bush and grass, and a large lake could be vaguely seen in the depths of the basin far away. Suddenly, Yefanyan seemed to think of something, and a gleam of brilliance flashed in his eyes. This is the valley of the 10,000 Beasts mountain range, where the nest of the dark crows in the valley is. The three people realized that they had come to the nest of the dark crow inexplicably. There were continuous violent vibrations under their feet, and the frequency was much greater than before. After exchanging a glance, the three of them stepped into the valley shrouded by the space barrier. The entire valley seemed extremely quiet, and even the sounds of birds and beasts commonly seen in the jungle could not be heard. The three of them came to the source of the earthquake, which was the Days Lake located in the valley basin. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook violently, and the deep lake in front of the three of them suddenly rippled with waves. Roar! Instantly, a water dragon several feet long roared out of the swamp, and with its powerful might, it rolled up waves on the deep Daze lake. The water dragon surged in the lake with great momentum, and the surrounding land also sent out a series of vibrations, extending to the depths of the mountains and forests far away. Yefanyan and Yeshinwei faced the surging water dragon, and both of them changed their faces, feeling the powerful energy contained in it. But strangely, the huge water dragon stirred up waves on the surface of the lake for only a few breaths, and then it roared shrilly, and then it exploded out of thin air and turned into rain, scattering and melting into the lake. The vibration from the earth also stopped, and there was no sound. What on earth is? Yefanyan opened her cherry lips slightly, looking at the deep lake in the distance, with doubt in her eyes. At this moment, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a prajna mask on his head, slowly turned around, looked at a certain direction behind him, and smiled softly. You have almost seen enough, right? At the same time, Yeshinwei seemed to have noticed something, his pupils shrank slightly, and he turned around suddenly. I saw that a group of mysterious figures wrapped in black robes appeared in the sky around them at some point, and there were also purple robes among them. Heterogeneous religion. Yeshinwei and Yefanyan's faces suddenly showed surprise. They had never thought that there would be so many heterodox believers hidden in this mysterious valley. Looking around, there were at least thousands of figures floating in the air, tightly wrapping the three of them. However, at the same time, the dense forest at the edge of the valley not far away suddenly heard the roar of wild beasts, followed by a rustling sound in the forest. Looking around, I saw beasts with terrifying auras stepping out of the surrounding mountains and forests, surrounding the valley where they were layer by layer. With almost no hesitation, these beasts and the heterodox believers in the air seemed to have reached some consensus, and swooped down at the three people at the same time. Thousands of powerful spirits gathered together, bringing a killing momentum, as if to wipe out the three people on the spot in an instant. You Grandma Bear, you are looking for death and find your uncle yet? Facing the many figures surging, Yeshinwei was not surprised but happy, and a fierce look flashed in his eyes. Although his injuries have not yet healed and he has consumed a lot of energy along the way, he is still a genuine destruction level warrior. His legs and feet turned into retractable springs, his body suddenly leaped up, his arms turned into steel double blades, and he rushed straight into the foreign believers swooping down from the air. In an instant, the sky was sprinkled with blood and rain, and countless foreign believers were killed and chopped to pieces by the extended arm blades before they could react. And Yeshinwei's eyes were filled with a strange madness. He, a destruction-level warrior, was suppressed by Mu Qiu all the way. Thinking of his fame, Yeshinwei has now become a servant to be driven by others. Damn it, this feeling is too aggrieved. As if to vent his anger, Yeshinwei's every attack was extremely fierce. He completely ignored his body when he opened and closed his arms, and several heads were cut off at the root with a swing of his arms, and every move was fatal. In just a few breaths, the sky seemed to be raining blood, broken limbs and scarlet flesh fell all over, and a gap was instantly opened in the mid-air. Oh no, this kind of energy fluctuation, is he a destruction level? Several purple-robed people in the crowd felt the terrifying momentum emanating from Yeshinwei, and their eyes suddenly flashed with horror and panic. Quick, contact the envoy! Several people exclaimed, and the terrifying murderous aura of the destruction level made them afraid. But when they thought of their mission, these purple-robed alien envoys suddenly showed a resolute look in their eyes. The aura on his body is unstable and he is injured. Let's entangle him and wait for the envoy to arrive. Several people looked at each other, obviously ready to die, but even so they still called on their men to use their bodies to dive towards Yeshinwei like moths to a flame. After a while, Yeshinwei, who had killed people in the crowd, was covered in blood, and one leg turned into a whip to whip several people away. He jumped in front of Yefanyan and Muqiu, breathing slightly. It can be said that Yeshinwei has not stopped for a moment since the battle with Dark Crow. In the battle with Muqiu, he consumed a lot of energy. Even Yeshinwei, a strong man of destruction, was a little overwhelmed. Yefanyan's pale face showed a ruddy color like a last burst of light, and he was actually trying to join the battle with his weak body. At this moment, Muqiu seemed to feel something, stepped forward a few steps, brushed past the two, and walked towards somewhere ahead. The calm voice of the man under the mask came, "I'll leave this to you first." After saying that, he walked towards the endless beast tied in front of him alone. Chiu Mu. A look of worry flashed across Yefanyan's eyes, but Yeshinwei stopped her. Yeshinwei shook his head and looked at the slender black-robed figure in front of him with deep meaning in his eyes. "Silly girl, this gentleman's ability is much greater than you think." The fierce beasts that rushed from the mountains and forests flashed bloodthirsty and fierce in their eyes the moment they saw Muqiu, and their huge bodies rushed towards Muqiu. However, before those mutant beasts that were biting Muqiu got close to the former, their bodies strangely exploded into balls of black flames. The next second, a passage composed of black flames appeared out of thin air under Muqiu's feet. All creatures that tried to approach this fire road, whether they were heterodox believers or mutant beasts, were burned to ashes by the scorching flames. Gradually, the figure surrounded by the black flames went deep into the valley and disappeared. A moment later, Muqiu, with a pile of broken animal corpses lying on the ground behind him, stepped into the big lake where the water dragon appeared. The lake was rippling with green waves, and the water surface was flooded with waves, as if brewing some unspeakable danger. The pupils under the mask were deep and indifferent, and Muqiu's figure floated out of thin air at the edge of the lake, and the black flames under his feet spread to his whole body as if they were alive. The boiling black flames wrapped Muqiu's body, forming a transparent flame ball, and then went directly into the lake. The surrounding lake surface immediately made a boiling sound after contacting the black flame light ball, and then it quickly evaporated. Just like this, the huge mountain lake actually opened up a gap under the erosion of the black flames, taking Muqiu into the deep bottom of the lake. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 470. Entering this large lake located deep in the valley, there was a sound of boiling water all around. As Muqiu continued to go deeper, it was strange that there was no trace of life in this vast swamp. Logically speaking, in a vast swamp as large as the 10,000 Beasts Mountains, countless dangerous deep-sea beasts should be born. All the life forms that originally lived in this lake seemed to have been wiped out, falling into a strange deep-sea silence. Goo-goo. Suddenly, the water below the deep water began to rise rapidly, and even the surrounding water waves steamed by black flames were boiling rapidly. Immediately afterwards, the surrounding lake water began to tremble at an irregular frequency, causing the land above to vibrate violently. Roar. I saw the blue lake water once again condensed into the huge water dragon several feet long at the bottom where the edge could not be seen, rushing towards the lake surface from bottom to top. Looking at the huge water dragon in his pupils from far to near, a flash of blood flashed in Muqiu's eyes. I saw that the black flame surrounding his body condensed again and turned into a black flame dragon that was even bigger than a water dragon. The giant black flame dragon and the water dragon collided at the bottom of the lake. It was like a thunderous explosion, and a vacuum appeared in the center of the lake for a moment. In the battlefield in the valley in the distance, countless people were attracted by the shocking phenomenon that happened on the big swamp. It was difficult for them to know what was happening at the bottom of the lake. Only the crazily steaming water vapor above the lake and the looming black flame exuded a hot breath. That's the bottom of the lake. It's terrible. One of the purple-robed men looked at the thundering lake, with a look of fear in his eyes. But in the next second, an extended steel knife suddenly penetrated his chest. As the steel knife was drawn out and blood spurted out, Yeshinwei's figure appeared behind him. Grandma is a bear. The more people bully the less people, right? Yeshinwei grinned and dropped the corpse strung on his arm. Today, young master, I will go on a killing spree. Above the ground in the distance, a cyclone rose under Yefanyan, and he waved a series of cold wind blades in his hand. Several monsters had their heads separated, and their flesh and blood flew everywhere. She suddenly raised her head and looked at Days in the distance, with waves in her beautiful eyes. Chiu Mew. Deep in the Days, the fierce collision between the black flame dragon and the water dragon caused a shocking phenomenon. The latter was instantly swallowed up by the scorching black flames, turning into steaming water vapor and dissipating in the turbulent lake water. And the huge black flame dragon remained unabated after devouring the water dragon and wandered towards the depths of Days. Like a peerless ferocious beast, the majestic water pressure is regarded as nothing by it. Just above the head of the black flame dragon, stood a slender figure wearing a ferocious mask. The black flame dragon swam all the way through the bottom of the lake, and finally reached the depths of the lake where the source of the earthquake occurred. The black flames once again transformed into a circular barrier surrounding Mewtwo. After Mewtwo saw clearly where the bottom of the lake was, a faint light suddenly flashed in his pupils under the crimson mask. I saw rising water surging deep in the rough bottom of the lake. And right at the place where countless surging waters converge, a strong middle-aged man is imprisoned. The middle-aged man is shirtless, his body is covered with crisscrossed bloodstains and scars, he has thick long black hair, a face full of stubble, and of vicissitudes of life. And the man's limbs were bound with thick iron chains, tightly connected to the rocks at the bottom of the lake. Even the man's neck was tightly clamped by a chain, and the deeply embedded chain strangled his neck with bloody marks. It was obvious that this middle-aged man had been imprisoned at the bottom of the lake for a long time. But the man's eyes were bloodshot, and his arms struggled to break free from the chains. Veins popped out on his arms, and he roared with excitement. Stepping on the bottom of the lake, every time he roared, the surrounding lake suddenly rippled with waves, and a surging water dragon could be vaguely seen in the rising waves. It turns out that the phenomenon of violent shaking of the earth was caused by the man in front of me. It is hard to imagine that the residual power generated when angry can cause such a shock to the mountains and forests outside the barrier. The strength of this man in his heyday must not be underestimated. Looking at the angry middle-aged man in front of him and his extremely powerful water control ability, Mewtwo couldn't help but recall what he had seen and heard at Qingyang Base before. An incredible idea came to mind. He appeared not far in front of the scarred middle-aged man, and suddenly said, "Lujins." As soon as these words were spoken, the anger in the eyes of the middle-aged man who was bound by the chains faded away, and a look of shock flashed instead. He suddenly looked at Mewtwo, who was surrounded by black flames, and said in a hoarse voice, "Who are you?" Hearing the middle-aged man's answer, Mewtwo's face suddenly showed a look of surprise. The middle-aged man in front of him is the long-lost second destruction-level guardian of Qingyang Base, the younger brother of Lu Jinchang, and the Hungs Wanjiang, who together with the former became the two heroes of Shan's, Lujins. But what worries Mewtwo even more is his other identity. He is also the biological father of Mewtwo's subordinate Lu Qianqian.